what's going to happen is going to happen, man. No need to rush.
And I'm back on the air. Hey guys, it's been a while. How you all doing? We are doing the World War I stream this week, and hopefully we get through the whole damn thing without my internet going down or Farty getting blown away like the Wizard of Oz. How you doing, MC?
Doing well. How's everybody else doing?
Yeah, you got your bicycle ready? Because we all know you're the Wicked Witch of Australia, right?
Actually, no. I'm the Good Witch of Australia. That's the actual evil one. You see that theory? It's actually the Good Witch of the East that uses Dorothy to knock off all of her rivals.
It's like Wizard of Oz fucked Game of Thrones and they had a baby, right?
Yeah, no shit. Look it up. Like the Good Witch of the West kills the bad witch and then gets her to kill the one with the water and then sends the fucking Wizard of Oz off in a balloon. Then she's left taking over and says, "All right, thanks, Dorothy. By the way, you can just click your heels and fuck off now. See ya."
I know you could have said that at the very beginning, bitch. Anyway, we had to hear those fucking midgets sing. Give me a break. Anyway, we are talking about the World War I era. We are in February 1915. We have a timeline. If MC wants to pull it up, we're going to go through it step by step, and we'll try and get through the month in about an hour, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. We'll see.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me move the timeline over here.
All right, while you're doing that, I'll check the chat. What's going on? Pinoid News, what's up, man? No, my girl didn't steal the cord of my computer, Pinoid. Oh, shit. And Jensen, of course, what's up, man?
We'll start with the February 1st, British Admiralty. Want to read it?
Yep. The British Admiralty issues orders forbidding neutral fishing vessels to use British ports. This is mostly a security measure. Basically, keep the foreigners out, so you keep your spy fishermen out there, out from your waters, your torpedo boats, your Q ships, that kind of shit. It's something that should normally be done.
Do you think it should normally be done? I think it was kind of a cunt move for Britain to do. I mean, they're just out there fishing.
He's not wrong. The one of the things that everybody knows is that the quote-unquote fishing vessels, right, are never fishing vessels. That they themselves are spies, right? Now,
yes, those Russian fishing vessels they've got up in the Alaskan seas at the moment, they've got some pretty fucking groovy surveillance kit on them for just fishing boats.
Yes, they've got some awesome antennas for deployment. So this has been a time-honored tradition that neutral quote unquote flying neutral flags are not neutral. All right. Now, it isn't just while this is specifically talking about the British, the Germans have done the same thing. Everybody does this for the most part. Now, unfortunately, what it does do, all right, is it has an effect on the one neutral country that's still out there. It does have an effect on the attitude of the United States. Granted, we're not in these kind of fishing waters, all right, but it does cause concern. And this is even going to get ramped up, as you see. So,
and I'll take the first bullet point on the 2nd of February. Turkish advance guards reach the Suez Canal. They begin their assault on the 3rd, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Just the advance guard, so it's not the main force, right?
Correct.
No. That's correct. Yeah, these are your guys that are going up to establish your defensive positions, to sort of establish where you're going to put your supply lines, where you're going to actually deploy your troops, and all this kind of stuff, and make preparations for them to arrive.
Now, maybe I'm wrong, but isn't the Suez Canal operated by the British at this point in history?
At this point in time, yes.
Yes. This was ever since the early, the mid 1800s, right, when they reopened the Suez Canal. The British, this has been a major part of British foreign policy. All right, specifically because it shortens the distance to the jewel in the British, in the British Empire's crown, which is India, by a significant amount. All right.
And this is also the same thing with the Panama Canal with the Americans as well.
Yes. Well, although the Panama Canal has never really been threatened. I mean, we've never really had to defend the Panama Canal. The Suez Canal,
its strategic purpose is the same.
It is.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, it makes a major difference. And so it's always been a part of, a bone of contention with the British, right, to keep it open. No matter what happens, it is something that they are very concerned about. And in fact, at this point in time, one of the reasons why the Turks are thinking that they can attack this successfully is the fact that at the start of the war, the British only had about 5,000 troops total in this entire area. All right. So from their standpoint, they're thinking of it as, okay, well, if we can attack it quickly, we can take it over before the British can resupply it, and it can, it becomes a major point for them. And there's also the fact that what they're worried about happens later, right?
And also too, at this point, we've also got the Anzac 9th Division in Egypt at the moment. So we're only just a few hundred miles down the road. So they want to try and get that before we get mobilised and try and defend it. Because if we got there, they simply wouldn't be able to do it.
Well, and what's more is it can be used for what it is used for later on in the war, which is a staging ground to attack them from.
Well, yeah, but no. And that's a fairly good strategic move. If they could capture it, keep it supplied, and throw a lot of troops there to protect it, that really hurts the British Royal Navy.
Oh yeah, that means at least another couple of weeks sailing around the Horn of Africa.
Yeah, no. So it does create a dynamic that's very difficult for the British, that the British have to be aware of, and you're going to see the British respond in an interesting way later on in the month. But on the next day, on February 3rd, you basically get the canal action. And I don't know if you're still showing.
Well, real quick, there's two more. I was still showing you, but there's two more bullet points on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so Aden, Protectorate is invaded by Turkish forces at the same time.
Right.
Also,
now, this is part. In reality, though, this is really part of the Suez Canal campaign, and you'll see that I think it's in the map. You'll be able to see it. If not, Aden is a small little city just on the other side of the Sinai.
You take Aden, you take the Gulf of Aden, and that's the entrance to the Suez Canal. So, by proxy, you have to take the whole lot.
Right. So,
or else if you decide to take the Middle Eastern end of the Suez Canal, you're basically bottling your forces into a tiny little bay, basically, and you just lock them in there, and they'll be defeated easily. So you've got to take Aden, and you've got to make sure that no one can get into Aden. And straight to
You'll see. It's all part of the same. It's all part of the same action, really.
This is all the Hormuz shit that's going on now with Iran. This is basically the same shit but 100 years ago.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, in a different, almost the same region, but a little bit different region.
Well, the last thing that happens on the 2nd, though, I don't know how to say intent.
The Entente,
communication to Greek, Serbian and Manchurian governments depreciating their intervention in Albania. What was the intervention in Albania again?
Wasn't that the Serbs?
Yeah.
Serbs going into Albania again?
Yeah, basically. The idea that the Serbs, that the Austro-Hungarians have no reason to be upset with the Serbs is a bit of a misnomer. The Serbs have been fomenting problems throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire. All right. And one of the places was with the Albanians, basically trying to get the Albanians to rise up to join Greater Serbia. And, of course, fighting through this region, it's all heavily mountainous. So it's very difficult to move in troops and everything at this point in time. You don't have, planes are just coming into the forefront. So people aren't flying over these areas to drop in troops and stuff like that. That doesn't happen even in this war. but basically what they're saying is they're trying to get the Greeks, all right, to not worry so much about Albania, but to actually try and help and open up an area for the Serbs, all right, because the Serbs are being pressed because they're basically surrounded. You know, the start of the war comes back with, okay, how are you going to protect the Serbs? And there's really not any way to protect the Serbs. So that's it's an effort at this point to try and if we can lower the amount of hostilities to at least some extent, maybe we can push all this back out. But of course it's never going to work.
Okay, so on the 3rd, the actions actually begin in the Suez Canal area.
And you end up with basically this, and Wikipedia is really good about some of these maps and everything. And this is some of the troops. These are the kind of troops that you're dealing with. This is the Beersheba troop in the Suez Canal area. Right now, here's the map. Okay, where a lot of the fighting initially is going to take place along this area here. All right, as they try and take it. You can see this is the one road that comes across here. All right. You can see this is the Sinai Peninsula in the smaller part. Go ahead.
Now, last week or last time I did mention that there was large swathes of this area that are impassable by terrain. This map's actually showing a lot more of these natural features that are blocking these roadways that are established.
Yeah, you had a question, Mad Dodge?
Yeah, compared to the Panama Canal, how big is the Suez? Comparable, smaller?
Oh, much larger. Much larger. Much larger. The Suez Canal is what? Around 100 miles long?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, the Panama Canal is only about like what 20?
So, okay, what is Turkey's goal? Is it to control the canal, or is it to destroy it? If it's to destroy it, you're talking about 100 miles of canal that you can place explosives along.
They don't. Well, I mean, it's not as easy as you think. You can't just blow up a small little section because that can easily get repaired. Okay. What they're trying to do is to deny the British use of it, first of all, and secondly, to take control of it. Right, so they want control. That would be the ultimate goal. But the main thing they're trying to do is to deny the Suez Canal from, the British, the Suez Canal, their traffic on it. And so you really need to have at least one side. You need to secure at least one side of the Suez Canal.
So are they doing most of their attack near Great Bitter Lake, or are they doing it up more towards the port?
Their goal right here is to take it since Ismailia. All right. Now they don't want to do it toward the ports because obviously if you try to take a port, the problem is that the British have a fleet, and the British then descend with far more. They can supply the fleet. Their fleet has guns, so they don't
Marines
and range.
and Marines
rather. Yeah. So their goal at this point is further inland to basically take Ismailia and then cut the canal in half. You have to respect the British fleet. I mean, that's one of the things that they have to recognize.
Yeah.
Here's another thing that shows a little bit larger thing. If you remember when I showed this the first time, it was showing the different routes into this area, right? This is the Great Bitter Lake area that they're going to be fighting over. This shows you they attempted 3 different routes to come in here: a southern route, a central route, all right, for their troops. The Aden area is right here, which they've succeeded in taking. The central, at least temporarily, the Ismailia route right here. Now you'll also notice, while it was showing in that previous map, the Turkish railway line along this area here. One of the other things that this shows you what the British have. That the British have rail all along here. So their ability to supply and move troops is far better along the entire line than it is here. And overall, the British population, or not the British, but the Egyptian population is more or less fairly tolerant of the British, of British occupation of the Suez, which is kind of unusual, actually.
Yeah, well, at this present time, this point in time, the Egyptians were fairly well allied with the British, and it wasn't until bloody Gamal al Nasser was overthrown was when they changed
When
their
Nasser
attitude pretty much.
when Nasser overthrows King Farouk.
That's the one, yeah.
Now, this picture, the reason why I wanted to show this picture is you see a couple of buildings, all right, but for the most part, what you're dealing with are tents. Look at these things. These are just tents. They just put up a few walls and then they throw a tent on top, right? But I also wanted to show you the landscape. Look at this landscape here. Now, this is a military outpost sitting in the middle of nowhere, all right? Look at this desert. This is what you're going to be fighting in. Okay. This is the kind of you're not fighting on terrain or anything. It's fairly featureless except for dirt, except for sand.
It has a nice big highway next to it.
And then I think a better picture is here. Here's the actual attack that you see take place, right? And you see remember the Great Bitter Lake, which you saw, right? And this is where the deployment of the troops is. Now, the problem, of course, is during this attack, they just don't have, they don't have the troops. They don't have the material, all right, to be able to do anything, and they have no logistics to keep it up.
But also, at the same time, they're forced to kind of do this by simply the time frames, because as we've just established with like the railway lines and the type of troops that are actually already in Egypt, only a couple of 100 miles away, that they're basically forced to do this, whether they've got the resources or the troops or not. Yeah.
Now, of course, the other thing about this is it's well known that they're coming. The British know that they're coming. The British have actually used, they're the only group around here that has airplanes, right? I mean, you can laugh if you want, about the type of planes that they had at this time, but because of that, they have the high ground as far as reconnaissance goes. They are very well aware that this attack is coming. They're very well aware of the makeup of this attack, what forces are expected when and where. And as a result, as they start to move forward, the British go, okay, well, throw a couple bombs on those planes, drop them from the air, right? Now you laugh, saying, "Well, what can that do?" Well, when you're talking about people on horseback and people on camelback, right, and you start dropping a few bombs in the area, it causes all sorts of panic.
And also, too, you got to remember, this is only a decade and a bit after the first flight, and this was space-age technology. This was the equivalent of the fucking space shuttle at the time, to actually be able to fly controllably and carry a payload to drop accurately on somebody.
Mm-hmm. And so, what happens with this is the British basically, are able to advance. Now, they do use a German Air Force, the Ottomans to attack. They attempt to attack the British water supply. All right, but of course, these kind of attacks are not. They're not big enough. All right, the kind of bombs that they have are 10-pound bombs, 20-pound bombs. Okay, the damage that's going to do is insignificant to an actual hardened point to any degree, right? Which, still, like I said, the British were expecting it, but the biggest advantage, of course, goes to the British because they can see the attack coming. And it shows you some of the British forces that they're able to move around. Now you got to remember, this shows the British here, but the British had the railway system. They're able to shunt people from one end of the canal to the other as they need it.
Now, interesting you bring this picture up here because it's not just dudes on horses. These are specific types of troops. They're called the Light Horse Brigade. And these are light mounted infantry. They're basically shock troops like you'd have with your cavalry regiments now, with your armoured mobility forces and whatnot. These guys were the original shock troops. These were the original special forces, pretty much. These were the guys that basically, like we would do in Beersheba, not far after this, basically we'd roll up on a place and we just fucking go down full noise and scare the fucking bejesus out of them and try and get to their position before they realise what the hell's going on, and take it that way. And it was fairly successful. And even in World War II, there were some cavalry charges in World War II with varying degrees of success. But yeah, this is what these guys were, and this is partially the whole point of why the Turks were forced to go and take the sewers and all that kind of stuff before they were ready and before they had all the supplies, because it wasn't just the Australians and the New Zealanders, but there was the light horse elements of them. So this is like the really good lot out of it. This is the cream of the crop.
The other thing that happens with this is as the Turks attack, all right, and they begin the attack. When are you going to begin the attack? Of course. Well, the time to begin the attack is just in the morning when the sun hasn't come out and life doesn't start to really suck, right? Well, they move in, all right. They are stopped by several of the companies of the Gurkhas that have arrived, all right. The fighting begins, and as it starts to spread, the British roll out artillery, which, quite frankly, the Turks don't have in abundance, right? They're able to hold them off, and then eventually what ends up happening is more Gurkhas arrive from the 10th Gurkha Company, and they basically lay down a fire to the point where them with the Punjabs from India, all right, are able to hold them off. They don't even get within 1,000 yards.
And this is pretty notable too, because the Gurkhas here are actually fighting out of their element. May have mentioned them before, but Gurkhas too are another part of the original special forces. These are Nepalese mountain men. Basically, they hunt by hand. They literally will creep up on an animal and slit its throat with a knife they call a kukri. And the kukri is this big bent blade that's designed to fit right around your neck. And the Commonwealth forces had Gurkha regiments, and these guys were so good that during World War II, Australian troops had to wear two parts of their uniform piss perfect and correct, or else they get mistaken by Japanese troops. That was their bootlaces done one way and a badge on their shoulder. And the first thing you'd know if there was a Gurkha there was someone feeling your boot or your shoulder. And a few seconds after that, if you'd forgotten to do it correctly, you'd get your neck cut. But these guys are mainly jungle fighting troops and all this kind of stuff. They're really sort of poorly used in this area.
And what you basically see is the attempt, if you really want to look at it, the attempt from the Turks at this point, after the initial surprise was lost, they just gave up. They said, okay, we're not going to be able to do this. We're not going to be able to supply it. Let's just go back. And they actually, after the third, they basically attack and then they retreat. They say, okay, this is not going to work, so let's just start rolling back. And actually, this is a good move on their part, because what it does do is it allows them to retreat with most of their forces, all right, without the British being able to trap them, all right, and then totally massacre their forces. There was approximately 30,000 to 40,000 troops, all right, in this attack.
Wait a minute, they had 40,000 and 5,000 British held them off? I said
initially. The British, when they saw this coming, plussed up rapidly, and the total forces in Egypt for the British are over 70,000.
You see, like what's basically happening there, Dodge, is like they already know they don't have the resources and all this kind of stuff, and they've gone into it basically, right, we'll have a go, see how far we get. The instant we start to lose, we're going to fuck off before they can organise themselves to try and chase us. And that's the only way that they're going to save themselves out of this. And that's exactly what they did. They came in, shit, there's more of them coming. We're clearly not going to win this. Quick, run, leg it. Pretty much.
You know, I think Robert E. Lee would have attacked along all ends of the fucking canal and probably breached it. But, you know. They all can't be Robert E. Lee.
And he would have been pinned like he was at Petersburg, and that would have been the end of him, like at Petersburg.
Shut up, Wimsy.
For all the good that Robert E. Lee is, I highly doubt you put him in this situation, he'd be able to operate as what you think he would be.
Oh, he would not. He would not even have attempted to attack the Suez at this point. He would attack to try to hit certain strong points and then buggered off, exactly like they did. Only he probably would have made a better job of hitting a weak point with all of his troops rather than trying to spread it along the entire Suez Canal.
All right.
So, no, he would not have done what Mad Dog just suggested.
I know. Okay, whatever. 3rd of February also. Bulgarian government negotiates loan of 3 million pounds, 3 million pounds to Germany.
Yes, because the Bulgarian government is now going to join the Central Powers. That's what they're trying to do. That the British are trying to do.
You wanted to call them the Axis, didn't you?
I did want to call them the Axis. You are correct. All right. For all intents and purposes, they are the Axis that comes up, but just one notable turncoat, meaning the Italians. But we won't discuss that.
So the Bulgarians are throwing their lot in with the Central Powers. Is there a political reason other than the fact that they're right there on the border, right? They're pretty much going
to... the specific reason is called Russia.
Yeah, and we'll see this between Britain and Russia in a few days, where they'll pool their resources and say, right, well, we'll chuck in a shit ton of money for this war.
Yeah, the Bulgarians don't get along with the Russians. That's the main reason. The Bulgarians resent the Russians, always have. They're uneasy with the Turks, okay? But to be honest, at this point in time, they've been they don't really have to worry about the Turks trying to invade because the Turks have so many other problems that they don't have to worry about the Turks. The Russians, on the other hand, are always a worry because, quite frankly, from the ideas of the way the Bulgarians are looking at it, the Russians have a more modern force and a far larger force, and so therefore they're the largest threat.
Yeah, no, and let's go ahead and move on to the 4th. Farty, you want to take the 4th of February?
The winter battle in Masura in East Prussia begins on the 22nd. Or see the 22nd, sorry. I'm not too clear on this one.
That's this battle right here. Right, you have basically two armies from the Germans fighting against two armies from the Russians, and of course the Russians are poorly led. One of the armies has just arrived when the Germans launched the attack. The Russian general of the 10th Army tries to warn the overall commander that the Russians are or that the Germans are coming, and that they need to be dealt with, or that they're getting ready to get attacked. The Russian in charge of this, Nikolai Ruzitsky, all right, basically goes, they're not going to attack in the snow. The Germans never attack in the snow.
Wonder if they said that 20 years later too.
So the commander of the 8th Army for the Germans is Otto von Bülow. In the snow on February 7th, he attacks. All right, and in fact, he attacks the 10th. I think it's the 10th of the 10th Army of the Russians. This is the Russian commander. There was Sievers. All right, he's the one who was trying to warn them that they're coming. What the Germans are attempting to do, and it's hard to see this here, right? But the Germans are attempting to recreate Khan or Kane, however you pronounce
Khan.
It. Right. And they're sending basically these armies, the 10th and the 8th, in two wings to create a pincher movement in an attempt to try and trap the Russians. All right. the Russian 12th is what I guess where Sievers was at. They're not successful in overall, but they do drive the Germans back. Okay, it is successful in regards to they're able to catch the Russians back. They are able to bag and capture 20,000 Russians in this battle. Between casualties and captured enemy, they are able, but the Russians are able to stabilize their lines. They basically are able to move their troops back, specifically because of one of their corps decides to create a stand right along this ridge line here. All right, and they hold off the advance for quite a while. All right, they of course are decimated. The Russian 20th Army Corps under Bucklow was surrounded, and they eventually get destroyed. All right, but it does prevent the Russians from gaining this major sweep and being able, because you can see what the Germans are attempting here. Is they're attempting to basically take this area here, surround it, kill it, and then at this point in time, now they've got wherever they want to go becomes open to them.
Yeah, that's something I was noticing. For being such a large, open country, they sure do have a lot of fucking railroads, don't they?
Well, I mean, they are trying to modernize. You got to understand that the Russians understood modernization was necessary. It's not like the Tsar wasn't trying to turn his country into a modern country.
And this is agricultural and all that kind of stuff, so you need to move resources around.
The other aspect of this is you got to remember the Germans began this fight on the defensive because they were assuming that they could win in the West. Now you're starting to see slowly everything start to move over to the east, where they have to fight more in the east to stave off the Russian bear and win these battles. And they're quite frankly having a lot more success, right? Due to the terrain, due to just how widespread this is. You got to remember the land mass that you're dealing with along here. I mean, it's just it's massive. It's enormous, the amount of terrain that you're dealing with. Now, what you have down here is you have the Austro-Hungarians attempt to push back, all right? But quite frankly, this turns into a shit show for the Austro-Hungarians, but this is also later in the battle. But it does prevent the Russians from concentrating any of their forces. They're being forced to defend along these entire areas. And this creates a situation where the battles are far more mobile than what they had to deal with, what they're dealing with in the Western Front, where you've got basically just the daily massacre happening on the Western Front, where no one's gaining territory. They're just basically you're just in a meat grinder being killed.
Well, here's an overall question. All right, I know what happens. The Germans start to push inward, and the Russians push outward through Austria-Hungary. I know how this starts to play out. The general consensus is the Russians were losing the war. That's not necessarily true, right? They were losing Germans, but they were kicking Austria-Hungary's ass.
Yes, in that regard, yes, they are winning in that regard. But the one thing that's happening is they're losing men in massive droves. All right, you lost 20,000 men. All right, in this battle with the Germans, or 200,000 rather, 200,000 men. And not only are you losing 200,000 men, you're losing all of their equipment.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing all of their armor. You're losing, well, not armor, but
their guns, their ammunition, their artillery, their uniforms, the warm weather gear, fucking all that shit.
Right, you're losing all of their supplies, their actual weapon supplies. The Russians, yeah, they can put a lot of men in the field, but they can't keep them supplied with the war material that they need. And that's what's happening here. Yeah, the Russians are able to continue the fight. Yes, they're giving up some territory. It's not critical, okay. But at the same time, it's going to the drain on them materially. You got to remember, Russia is not as well ready for this war, even though they have modern weaponry. They don't have enough of it. They're not industrialized. And who are they throwing into these battle? The peasants.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to become a major problem later on, because guess what peasants do? What are peasants good for? They're good for supplying food. Guess what happens when people can't eat?
They revolt.
You know what peasants are also good for? Revolting. But we'll get to that.
The peasants are revolting. I know, they stink on ice.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final thing on this date was the Germans announced that they're going to begin a submarine blockade of Great Britain on the 18th of February.
That should actually be sort of reworded to say the Germans finally admit to the German blockade of Great Britain. Well, they're already doing it so far.
But not like they're going to.
No.
Okay? Not like they're gonna. This is going to turn into a massive shit show.
Well, no, and why exactly are you announcing to the enemy when you're going to blockade said enemy?
Because what they're announcing isn't to the enemy. What they're announcing to the rest of the world now is that they consider everywhere around Great Britain to be blockaded, and our subs will begin sinking your ships. Because this is a blockade now. If you have a neutral ship in this area, we will sink it.
See, the whole point of a blockade is to prevent ships from getting in. And if you can prevent half the ships coming in from coming by simply saying, don't bother showing up, and they don't bother showing up, well, there's half your job done. Don't show up or we'll shoot you.
Okay.
Don't show up or you'll get sent straight home, which is what we did to the boat people, and it worked.
Does that answer your question, Mad Dodge?
See, there's a lot of bullshit that goes along with military tactics and all this kind of stuff. Half of warfare is really trying to bullshit your enemy. Fuck, I've completely forgot where I was going with that. Oh, that's right. So take the Pentagon, for example. Everybody thinks that every last inch of the Pentagon is covered by cameras. No, you don't have to. You only have to cover certain parts of it because everybody thinks you won't get in there without being filmed, so there's no point even bothering. Sure, people might try, but the large majority won't because of that little aspect right off the bat. And if these people just think, nah, we're not even going to bother because that's too hard basket, well, then they're not even going to bother and you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to worry about that small percentage that might. So if you can bullshit your enemy into saying, oh, we've got huge chunks of fucking troops in this joint, don't attack here, and then they go somewhere else where you actually do have all your troops, well, there you go. You've just won.
Well, yeah, World War II, we'll talk about a little story there. I gotcha. But no, 5th of February.
The guy with no name?
I didn't hear what you said, dude.
The guy with no name?
No,
yeah. We'll worry about that later.
Yeah. 5th of February, British, French, and Russian governments agree to pool their financial resources.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't have pooled with the Russians, but whatever.
But this is also a big fuck you to the Central Powers as well. This is sort of like a rebuttal to the blockade. All right, you're going to blockade? Fine, we'll fucking side with the Russians. How do you like that?
It also is a response to the loan the Germans gave to the Bulgarians.
And it also is a very strategically sound move. I mean, you've got the Central Powers, you've got the British and the Commonwealth and the French on one side, and you've got the Russians on the other, and they're both they're both your enemy, right? So the Russians are fighting the same fuckers that you're fighting. Why not link up with them?
Especially considering that the Russians are the ones that are going to need the resources more than anything else. But by the same token, helping the Russians isn't easy. And this is one of the problems. Yeah, it's great that they announced this. It's great that the French announced it and the British announced it. But how are they going to supply them? Yeah. Well, supplying Russia is not an easy thing to do. Why? Well, quite frankly, because the only way that you can give them support would basically be to doing it from the Atlantic. All right, that's where you need it to try and land supplies and troops and everything else. On the other side is a bit more hazardous. Number one, and the material that they're trying to supply them with is all being created in Europe. It's all being created in Great Britain. It's all being created in France. Well, how are you gonna get that food? How are you gonna get that supplies directly over to the Russians? Well, the only way to do it really would be to sail it, along the North Sea. Well, what do you have going on in the North Sea?
Blockade.
You got a bunch of subs.
No, you buy the equipment from the United States and you funnel it through Japan, who's an ally, right there to the Pacific end of Russia.
The Japanese and the Russians fucking hate each other at the moment. That's not going to happen. Fucking and then logistically, Russia has always been a cunt to fucking support, even in World War II, especially from the Pacific side, because you got to traverse all of that country, and there's not really this huge logistics train going from one end of Russia to the other. It is actually quicker to go from England up through the North Sea and around near the Arctic Circle. It is easy to do that. It is still a fucking pain in the ass, but yeah. Just the resources weren't there to move that amount of shit from, and even in World War II, it was the same thing there too. They just didn't have the resources to, and it wasn't economical enough.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So, yeah, MC, go ahead and read the 6th of February and continue on from there.
I'll do the 6th and the 7th since they're quite related.
Mm-hmm.
On the 6th, the British, the SS Lusitania, arrives in Livermore, flying the United States flag. Or Liverpool, excuse me, Liverpool. All right. And then on the 7th, you have the British saying, they issue a statement saying it was fully justified to fly a neutral flag at sea, saying that we're going to continue to fly American flags over British ships.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not appreciated.
No, it's not appreciated, and it caused quite an uproar back here at home for you and our people, right, MC?
Yeah,
we weren't too happy.
Well, also, too, this was part of the justification for sinking the Lusitania later on, and saying it was running under false flags and it was supposedly carrying munitions and weapons and stuff like that as a neutral ship or a United States ship that wasn't a part of the war yet. And the Germans were saying, by that rationale, it was perfectly fine to sink a ship full of civilians.
Well, this is this is known for being a quote unquote passenger liner, but yeah, it is arriving from the United States, all right, with quite frankly military supplies. Let's be perfectly honest here. The Lusitania is being supplied with military supplies and military hardware.
Yeah, no, you're right. We are selling them weapons. But the thing is, though, I remember that movie Lord of War, and I know this one scene where the ship is being stopped by the United States, and they're like, "What flags do we have on here?" I don't know. We got a Denmark flag. All right, throw that one up, or some shit like that. Do they really carry a bunch of fucking flags on them?
Yes.
Yeah, well, see, cruise ships can be operated out of different countries. The majority of ships usually run out of places like Liberia because there's really, really cheap fucking tax breaks and all this kind of stuff for cruise liners and ships and all this kind of stuff. But sometimes you say, for instance, Disney does do carnival, does do tours and stuff like that. Maybe they've gotten really big and they need to hire a boat. Well, they just get one from, say, fucking P&O. And that ship might be registered in Liberia, but the way Disney does it is like, oh, well, no, we need it to be an American ship now. So they just pop out their American flag and ship. Now we're American. We're registered under American flag. So ships can be hired out to different companies and their registrations in different countries and all this can change intermittently. So, yeah, that's partially the reason why they do carry multiple flags.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
So there, but that's not the reason Lusitania was flying the American flag. Let's be perfectly honest here. The main
No. Yeah, this is absolute evasion.
For being sank.
Yeah, and technically it is a breach of like the terms of service with warfare and shit like that. You're not supposed to run either enemy colours to fool the enemy or fucking.
It's not cricket.
Yeah, it's just not cricket.
It's not cricket, but it is war. You got to remember, this is a war, all right?
Mm.
So on the 9th, you have the 1st Canadian Division crosses from England into France. You're beginning now to see the rest of the British Empire begin to create a presence on the European continent. On the 11th, you have the United States sent a note to the British government saying, "Hey, we don't appreciate what you did."
Yeah, the Americans went, "Hey, that's just not baseball," and then the Brits went, "You mean rounders?" And it's actually cricket, mate.
and the United States then plays a game called they basically take the Dacia, all right, and it sails from the United States for Bremen, all right, with a cargo of cotton. And what they're saying is that this is now an American ship. It's American because we call it an American ship, even though it used to be owned by the Germans. We sold the Germans say, yeah, we sold it to the Americans, so therefore it's a U.S. ship. This will come back later, and this is the ship itself. Now, this ship is also, while it does contain cargo, is also a well-known cable layer. All right. Now, why were cables important? Because this is how countries communicated with each other. Yes, they would do wireless, but they also did cable to try and keep much of their communication between the nations classified or secret.
And you prefer to have a cable too, because that just means that you're not broadcasting your messages out in the open air so that people can pick them up. Correct.
So this is you'll see it on February 27th. You'll see what happens to the Dacia. Right. The Entente government suggests to the Greek government that it should intervene to support the Serbians. All right. And promise military support in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, this is in lieu of fucking the Commonwealth and all of those not being able to help. It's more kind of like, hey, Greece, you're not really doing much. Fucking how's about you help them?
Right.
Well, no, and the second one here is really interesting, though. Mutiny of the 5th Light Infantry, the Indian Army at Singapore. You know much about that, Farty?
Not really, no. Unfortunately.
This
sounds like it would be a good story.
It's a carryover. It's still a carryover from the Great Mutiny.
Oh, is this the fucking pig fat and the fucking bullets thing again?
It's not that specifically, but it's a carryover from that. Yes.
Oh, okay, so the start of that was there was an incident where they had both Muslim and Hindu forces fighting for the British, and the Muslim forces wouldn't use the British ammunition because they were packed in tallow, which is pig fat. I'm pretty sure the Hindus also had a problem with it too, being it was a fucking animal product. But yeah, they weren't treated very well after that, and it was a big brouhaha.
Interesting.
Yeah, you end up
with all these years.
Well, no, it was not a joke. The Great Uprising in India was not a joke. All right, and a lot of there were several things that were going on, not the least of which is and it created a dynamic which the British were in the middle of. Right? Because you got to remember, the Hindus and the Muslims, they have history of not liking one another. All right, and for the most part, that was always simmering in India. And one is you have the Indians being told, the Hindus being told that British are going to end any option of the caste system. All right, while the Muslims are being told they're putting pig fat in the bullets in the cartridges, so when you bite the cartridge to fight for them, you are now dishonored and you can no longer go to heaven. All right, you're now disgraced. So This is going back and forth. Now, the reality is that's not what's happening. The British were not doing this, all right, but both sides were basically pointing to the British being the bad guys, and there's a revolt as a result. Now, the revolt is put down fairly quickly, for all intents and purposes, for the size of India and everything. The revolt is minor. The mutiny is minor, but those hard feelings do carry over, and you end up with a situation very similar where you basically have the fifth infantry. It's just one unit, basically mutiny, and it's basically put down and suppressed, right? But it does happen. And it's kind of an offshoot of that. You still have that kind of animosity. This does cause the British to be very cognizant of when they move colonial troops, all right, out, when they're using troops from the colonies. So it does slow down the Indian contingents. As a result, really, I don't think any of the Indian contingents were ever sent, for the most part, to Europe, right?
You know, we did, and in fact, it was this kind of a thing that basically taught us that out of the three that are there, the Muslims, the Hindus, and the Sikhs, that's the Sikhs are the ones that we can trust. They're actually really good soldiers, the Sikhs.
So it's just they start taking only specific ones.
Well, they did take a whole lot, but you'd find that a lot of your hierarchy and all that were all turban wearers and stuff like that, and a lot of the honour and tradition and all that kind of stuff was more for the Sikhs as opposed to the rest of them.
All right, and then also on the 15th, you have an agreement between Great Britain and France supplementing prize conventions, all right, of the November 9th, 1914. Basically, they're coming to an agreement of who gets the prize ships. All right, this is important because what's been happening, right? I shouldn't say it's important. It's not really that important. What it is you have France was disagreeing with Great Britain about what happens when you capture a prize ship, because most of the time the British would be the ones capturing it, but it would be taken to a French port. Okay, so it was like, well, then who owns the cargo that's being seized? Who gets the seized cargo? That's what this is now. This is just
I would think it'd be 60-40. The people that captured 60 and the port 40.
Yeah, but you got to remember, if it's 60-40, then you got to send those supplies of that captured ship over to the other country.
And the French and the British are kind of sort of fighting over resources between themselves too. It's like the French are going, but hang on, we need this to do this, and the British go, yeah, but we need this to do that for years. And it's like, yeah, but look, if we did it for ourselves, then you wouldn't need it.
Yeah,
and forth like that.
And you're talking ore. You know, you're talking ore like nickel ore and so forth. And you're also talking other supplies that both sides are basically desperate. Both sides are looking for supplies. All right, so that's what this is. But you are correct. It is. So this agreement basically says, okay, here's what the breakdown will be, and from most sides, it keeps things amenable. Okay. So then you have some small actions being taken place. You have the Cameroons being taken by the British, or by the French forces. The British government decides, and this is a big one. The British begin to try and enforce the Dardanelles. All right, they come back with a plan that they're going to try and force the Dardanelles, and we'll get to that.
This will actually come about on April the 25th.
Well, it'll culminate on April 25th. You'll see them begin some actions, some naval actions before then, right? Which are quite frankly doomed to failure. All right.
Or more commonly known as Gallipoli.
which is coming, yes. The British government extends the prohibition of trading with the enemy to the territories of the British, which,
or if you want to say it like a retard, Gillipili.
Gillipili. You also have some small actions taking place on the 17th, where the Austrian forces retake Bukovina, but this is small little stuff that's not really doesn't mean much in the long run. All right, Memels are reoccupied by the German forces once again. Small ship. The British or the German airship L3 is destroyed. All right, and L4 is destroyed off of Denmark. Basically, this is they're shooting down some of these airships, and then on the 18th, the important thing, the German blockade begins.
Officially.
Yeah, no, it's still going to be a while before it forces the United States into the war, but it is a landmark. But then they do end up repealing it, right?
No,
really.
The blockade. They're still saying what the Germans have said at this point is they're beginning the blockade. If they see a British ship, they're not going to surface; they're going to sink it. So if they think it's a British ship, they're going to sink it. All right, regardless of what flag. They're not gonna come to the surface and say heave to, but they are still saying heave to ships that are flying neutral flags. At this point, it isn't unrestricted naval warfare, submarine warfare yet.
Oh, okay. So if you're flying the Stars and Bars, they would try and board you. What if you refuse?
You would be stuck.
Simple as that.
Simple. Heave to or else. No.
Yeah.
Boom. Down to the bottom of the ground.
You were warned.
Fair enough, I
but
guess.
That also does come down to the captain's responsibility. I mean, if it's a container ship or cargo ship or something like that, it is not as bad. But if you're the captain of like a cruise liner, when you got, let's say, 200 or 300 people on board and they're all civilians, and you do not heave to, well, you're the cunt that's just now killed a shit ton of civilians, not the submarine.
Yes.
So it's kind of like in your prerogative to stop if you can, to prevent from, like, if you rightfully going to be prevented from being sunk by stopping, then by all means fucking stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just asking.
Yeah, on the 19th of February, the Allied naval attack on the Dardanelles forts commences.
Okay, I've got a couple of maps of this that show you the Dardanelles, and basically they're talking about these forts down here. It's hard to see on this map because there's a lot going on, and it's still, this map is probably a little bit better that shows you the defenses.
Yeah, there's an initial attack there, as you see all these little blue dots that are going up this channel here, up the Dardanelles Straits there. Their initial thought, no shit, was to just run a bunch of dreadnoughts straight up the guts there and start shelling the bejesus out of these forts. And
yes,
that was not a good idea.
Not only was it not a good idea, first of all, the first part of the plan was to take and reduce these forts here. Okay, and overall, this part of the plan goes pretty well. All right, for the British, all right, because it's like, okay, well, yeah, we can reduce these pretty simply. The problem is that reducing this is only part of the issue. Yeah, we could reduce these because we can move in, and then once they ran into here, you're running into minefields.
Minefields, crossfire, fucking. Yeah, you get slow-moving ships moving up a confined space trying to navigate their way through minefields and stuff like that, whilst also getting bombarded by fucking shore batteries. From close range, mind you.
Why can't
this is almost point-blank range.
Why can't you take the forts and create a beachhead on either side of the...
Well, this is what we do a little bit later on with the
whole
Gallipoli
talk about
campaign.
the Gallipoli campaign and what this leads to. But their initial idea is exactly what Farty said. They thought that they could take these major ships and just run them right on through without any problems whatsoever.
Use their big guns to smash the fortresses.
The cool thing about these mines is this area is so small. All right. You can see, all right, I mean, you can see the mile, how wide this is. You're talking a small area. You can see from one side to the other. And the way they've laid these mines, these are not the mines that you see in World War II where it just floats in there and then it floats into something and goes boom. These mines, all right, are being manned by people on the coast, and they only blow up when they see an enemy ship because they're being controlled. Okay? In other words, they activate or deactivate these minefields as they see. So if the Russians were friendly at this point, they're not. But if the Russians were friendly, for example, they could hide the Russian ships there and let the Russians come out anytime they wanted to. So it's kind of a thing. And then you'll notice there's a minefield here. This is going to become important later.
Yeah, that looks like a total shit show.
And in this action too, we also lost the Australian submarine, the AE2, and basically we tried to sail it up the Dardanelles. But what actually happened? This is like new submarine technology here too, and we didn't really know about water densities and all this kind of stuff. And what happened was they went to submerge. They hit an unstable layer of water, and basically it flipped the submarine so it was pointing vertical. And it went down, then basically popped straight up out of the water, and the Turks fucking saw it, went back down again, they came back up, and they fucking shot it, and it sank.
Where were these mines when the Confederacy needed to mine the Mississippi? Just saying.
Hadn't been invented yet.
If you if you notice, they attempted to do that. It's just a matter of a river is a bit different than as far as putting mines in a river and trying to hold it, especially when the Union forces are sweeping both sides of the river to prevent people from laying in wait with the mines.
Yeah, fair enough. But how far do they get on the initial run, or do they make the run on this day?
They get about here.
How many ships are sank?
A bunch. a bunch are pulled back and damaged, and they're forced to pull them back. It is like you said. It is a shit show. It is
not a good idea.
Yeah, you can put that in the bad category. Yes, this is bad.
They did not have a good day.
Well, was this Churchill's idea?
Yep.
Well,
yes, it was. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, it was. Well, because they're expecting the Turks to be. They have no regard for the Turks. They really have no regard for the Turks. They really believe that the Turkish Empire is a backwater, that these people can't do anything possibly right. They have no industry for the most part, all right, and therefore, they can be easily just swatted like a group of flies and just swatted out of the way. They really did believe that, and they also believed that the British ships were so superior. Yep. All right, that they couldn't be harmed by whatever silly mines that can be created by the.
And that's an artifact of like where I keep maintaining that this is the first for a lot of things, right. This is the first time that they're using their fast dreadnought heavy battleships and all this kind of stuff that are designed to take a massive pounding. Have got these huge ass guns that can beat anything on the planet. Oh, they're invincible. Of course, yeah, no worries. Let's just sail them up there and see what happens. Well, oh shit, they're not that invincible. Well, we learnt that one.
Here, let me pull this up. Here's one of the British ships sinking. All right.
Try not to be a giggly American next time you show that.
Here's more damage being done. Does this give you an indication of what you're dealing with?
Man, that is some shit right there, dude.
They got mauled badly.
Well, but
I half expected them to be the band playing as it sank.
I mean, this is, you can see that this is one of the one of the battle cruisers, right? Irresistible. I think it was a battle cruiser. All right. I mean, this is a capital ship going down, basically. So,
this is the equivalent at the time of a Nimitz class carrier being sunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It is a pretty big deal.
So the Turks have been able to fight your navy better than the Germans.
Well, they're not doing a naval fight. They're not engaging ship by ship. They're just hitting them with mines and gunfire from the shore.
Yeah, well, if you lead yourself into a a mildly competent ambush, you're going to take heavy losses, and this is exactly what the British did. Like the Turks had an element of defense, and the British just walked straight into an ambush and just happily singing along. It's like, yeah, hey, woohoo, hey, bang! What the fuck was that?
This is the British naval equivalent of going over the top and charging machine gun fire.
Yeah,
That's
doesn't matter what
exactly
you
what
got.
this was. It really is the idea that their ships were so much better that they couldn't be harmed. I mean, it was just absolutely insane.
Another aspect too is, well, the ships are moving, the forts aren't. We're harder to hit, and they're not. Not so much.
Well, when the ship's got to conglomerate and go to a small little area, you just rain fire in that area.
Yes, that rationale works perfectly fine when you don't have these fucking minefields pushing them all into one spot too.
Well,
Yeah.
if you wander out of that spot, you hit the mines.
Yeah.
Okay, on a serious note, how many men went down with their ship, or were they mostly
Well,
Russian?
it's hard to say because this campaign lasts from February all the way into April when they begin the landing of the Gallipoli.
Mm.
So really, we'll talk about that when this whole thing is over.
Okay, so on to, I believe, the 17th, right?
No,
Or
Yes.
no,
Yes.
on the 19th.
19th.
19th. Stanislaw, captured by Austrian forces, see October 30th. The Norwegian SS Belgrade torpedoed, but reaches port. First ship torpedoed by a German submarine without warning.
So now you
Belgrade, sorry.
Yeah, no, the first shot has been fired, so to say, even though it's not the first shot. But they make it to port. How lucky were they?
Yeah, well, this is the first torpedoed. There's been plenty of naval action already. I mean, Australia's already fired on a German ship coming into port. We've done this almost a month ago. But this is the first one that's been torpedoed, not actually shelled and shit, because that's what they were doing before. If you'd heel to the submarine and they decided to sink you, they'd take the crew off and they'd actually use a deck gun to destroy the ship, not a torpedo. But if they were going to just sink you without warning, they'd just torpedo you.
And that's what this was. This is the first torpedoed ship that makes it. You also got to remember something else that people forget about during this time frame. Ships going missing
Is normal.
It is something that does happen. So we don't really know whether or not they were the real first ship that was torpedoed. We were just the first one that actually made it to port and was able to report it.
Well, that's a good point. And isn't it in 1915 when Amelia Earhart takes off and begins
No,
that's way later.
Okay.
That's in the 30s, dude. Yeah.
Oh, that's World War II. You're right. Not World War One. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a ways away yet. So then you have issues for the employment of the Dardanelles for the Australians and the Anzac troops. In other words, get them ready for Gallipoli. Congratulations. The initial thing with the Navy being able to do it isn't going to work. So
we need some sophistication. Let's call the Australians.
Well, I'm sure you went to school, right? So you had history class. What do they teach you guys about World War One in there? I'm sure you guys are pretty proud about the Anzacs, right?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. This is something I've been brought up with my entire life. I also knew a lot of blokes that were actually there too, because I had the luxury of being alive whilst these guys were still alive, and I was able to actually speak to them, march with them at the Anzac Day parades and all this kind of stuff. And I actually did get to listen to a lot of their stories. Now, at this point in time, we've got the Australian Light Horse, and we got a few divisions of infantry of both New Zealand and Australian troops, mixed in with some divisions of British troops, and we're already in Egypt by this stage, acclimatising and starting to train up for desert warfare. So this is about the point where they've now started to say, right, we've got our deployment orders and all this kind of stuff. We've actually got to start making ready for actual combat. So we'd be starting to build up, food supplies, stocks of water, ammunition, getting the horses over and all this kind of stuff. And even in some cases, reinforcing certain elements of the units that are there. So,
but what's interesting at this point is there's and it doesn't say it here, but what's happening in the British, in the British High Command is there's a fight going on. All right, because the army wants to use these troops, all right, not for Gallipoli. They want to use them for the campaign against the Turks in the southern campaign through the Sinai and then further up. They are protesting this. They do not want to use the Anzac troops in that way. They want to use them as a mobile ground troop, all right, to be able to easily take care of the Turks on the ground. All right. And they're doing everything that they can. You got to understand the way the military tends to function is when they don't want to supply something, what they'll do is they start doing things to prevent a quick deployment of troops. Like, well, we can't deploy them because of XYZ. Oh, these guys are over here doing this. These supplies didn't show up at the right train because they just so happenstance they went to the wrong place. The army is dragging its feet. They do not want to participate in this naval campaign against Gallipoli.
Yeah, and another reason why the pushback from the actual officers on the ground and all this kind of stuff was mainly because, like I said, with the Gurkhas, it's a poor utilisation of the forces there. Like MC said, they wanted a fast land army, not an amphibious assault force, and that's exactly what they had. They had the Light Horse Brigade. These guys are designed to travel across large swathes of land and take it fast. They're not designed to go and jump off a ship and then try and scale a hill or something like that. So you got a lot of blokes down there saying, no, we don't want to go because we're not supposed to do this shit. You're better off sending somebody else, or else you're going to get us all killed. And it's indicative of a proper officer is trying not to get his blokes killed. Yes,
and so you have infighting that you're wondering, okay, well, if they're trying to go into the Dardanelles, how come they don't just turn around and send them right away? Because the army doesn't want to send them right away, and they're doing everything they can to prevent it. All right, now and initially, and this goes back even to the British High Command inside of London, right, where initially this was all supposed to be a combined effort, right? It was Winston Churchill who screws this up and says, well, we won't need the army to do this. It can be an all naval campaign. And the army is looking at him going, you're insane. The only chance you have is if the army goes through it. But it's Winston Churchill's force of personality that convinces the high command that, oh yeah, the Navy can do it on its own.
Also, to another aspect as well is it's another new aspect of warfare. The amphibious operations like we know it today were fucking almost non-existent at this point in time. They didn't have troop ships, which is the reason why they were using ships like the cruise ships like Lusitania for troop ships and stuff like that. They didn't have proper landing craft or anything like that. Literally, we were landing on the Gallipoli shores in rowboats.
They don't have landing craft. There is no such thing as landing craft. That actually gets developed in World War II.
Yeah, and so when the Admiralty comes around and says, well, we want to stick a whole bunch of people on ships and then get them to jump ashore and all this, the Army's sort of going, what the fuck are you on about? That sounds like the fucking most retarded shit I've ever seen. What the hell? Well, okay, yes, it can work when done properly, but yes, they were right at the time. What the hell are you thinking?
Well, but that does show you something that's different. Before, no one ever had landing craft because, quite frankly, you never needed them. You didn't need them for surprise. You could land forces in an area, and by the time the enemy knew about it, right, and could communicate to anybody that it happened, then it was a surprise, right, to do anything about it. but things have changed. Technology has changed this kind of warfare dramatically, especially radio. Radio has changed a lot of how these forces are gonna be reacted to when they get deployed. But
And also
nobody's
landline
thinking along
telephone as
those
well.
lines.
Also landline telephone as well.
Yes, there's a lot of technological evolutions that really affect, how the military is able to react. All right, to these kind of things, and so a landing that would normally take 2 to 3 days in an area, perfectly fine, because the enemy could never organize a counterattack by then. Now, yeah, the enemy can organize a counterattack very quickly in a matter of hours now, rather than taking a week or 2 weeks to try and organize a counterattack.
See, Dodge, it's a difference between, just say Paul Revere had an ANPRC 77 set, and all he had to do is just go, all stations, stand two. You imagine what would have happened if all he needed to do was that instead of jumping on his horse and running around the place.
I would have made it more dramatic though, and still said the redcoats are coming. But hey, I get your point.
But that's the difference now. It's like, we've gone from the previous conflicts where if you attack a place, well, it might take a day or so for the horse rider to get to his next element. Now we've got, and a couple of hours later they're already on their way. So that's another one of the firsts that are in this, that we've got to learn that, this is now existing. This is how it can be utilized. This is how it can be used against us. Right.
Are we looking for Greek food or what?
Are you looking for Greek food? I think you're talking about your normal things there at Mad Dogs, but anyway. No, it's just showing you how things have changed, all right, and how what the dynamics are that you're dealing with. That the world isn't what it used to be. It's not. There's a lot of differences now.
All right, so we're starting to hit the end of the month, and I think a few things actually happened. So let's try and hit some of those beats here.
Okay, one of the things that I wanted, first of all, you see in the end of the battle, you see in the beginning of the Battle of Prizance, all right, which is just an attempt by the Germans to try and finish up this big sweeping movement, and unfortunately for the Germans, all right, the Russians basically fight well, and they are able to fight along this line instead of being a surprise where they're quickly overwhelmed. They fight along this line from February 24th all the way to March 23rd. So this is just the beginning battle where basically they're just shooting. There's a lot of death and destruction coming in here. One of the things that happens is right here. If you take a look, this island chain here is now seized by the British. All right. Yes, they're technically Greek islands, but of course, this is all in preparation to support the Dardanelles campaign, which is what you see going on down here. All right. That also takes place. The first British territorial division north of Madrid, not to be confused with the new armies. All right, leaves England for France. So basically, you're seeing one of the armies coming from more armies are being flown into, or I shouldn't say flown, but pushed into.
Sailed into France. On the 26th, this is another first new weapon of modern warfare. This wasn't exactly a flamethrower as such. However, it was the first basic kind of flamethrower type device to be used in warfare. And this was used on the Allies the Entente on the Western Front.
Yeah. So basically, the Waffenführer is now becoming a thing, the flamethrower, and you see the British begin to move a campaign. They're right here, and they're trying to take out this area from the Germans. All right, they have seized this area, and they begin an overland campaign. Now, this overland campaign. Now, granted, this is starting in February. Yeah, when they get here and finish this march in May. because you're going through heavy, jungle and all sorts of nasty shit. All right, so good to go from here to here. Now, granted, this is a few hundred miles. All right, a few hundred kilometers, but still, all right, this is a long-term campaign of march along this lane to get to Windhoek. All right, so, and then you end up on the 27th of February.
Remember that ship, the Dacia, we spoke about earlier?
Yeah, this one. It gets seized.
Well, isn't that an American ship?
Nope, that's a German ship. That was the German ship that was flying the American flag to snub the British and go, yeah, well, you did it.
Yeah, but the Americans were not. We Americans were not happy with this because it had been sold to the Americans, all right, and was bringing cotton, all right, to the Germans. Land of cotton, whole thing, and it gets intercepted and is seized by the French.
Fuck the French.
But this was part of that the earlier part. Remember when we were talking earlier about the deal between the French and how the material will be divvied up. This is an example of it. Because to be honest, I don't even think it was truly seized by French naval forces. I believe it was actually seized by British naval forces and then given to the French.
Mm.
So.
Yeah, that did happen quite a lot.
All right, so you have this back and forth going on, obviously, amongst the European powers. The United States, we're sitting back, we're watching the dumbass Europeans flying our flag left and right. Now the French have seized a ship of ours. This is 1915, so the stock market hasn't crashed, so we're still good there because we still have the roaring 20s up ahead of us. So.
The Americans, were considered non-belligerents. Now, one of the things that Cabby was always upset about was that we were late getting into this war, and that we were such great allies, and that why didn't we join right away, and all this other stuff.
MC, that's just a common joke in the Commonwealth. It wasn't just Cabby. We all do that.
Yeah,
we're just taking the piss.
Yeah, the thing is that at this point in time in history, the British were not considered by the Americans as if you were allies.
No, that's correct, yeah.
There was still a lot of animosity about the British, to be honest, all right, for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of respect, don't get me wrong, but there's still a lot of animosity, especially when it came down to the naval forces and the treaties that were trying to limit the U.S. naval forces.
And that's where I've mentioned previously, too, that if anything... if between the three of them, like the Germans, the French, and the British, the Americans would most likely be expected to side with the French because they've got the biggest sort of connection between the two of them there, not so much the British.
But the reality is that from a trading perspective, we do the vast majority of our trade with the British. All right. Yes, the French, we do a lot of trade with the French too. We were a trading nation from that perspective. I'm not going to deny that. But the reality is our connections with the British are still quite significant in comparison to quite frankly, to the Germans. We did not have a lot of trade with the Germans in comparison to what we traded with the British and the French.
Yeah, but here's the thing: we had a lot of foreign German nationalists living within the United States who did kind of, in certain areas of the U.S., have a German lean when it came to, well, both wars, to be quite frank.
Well, no, there is a large German immigrant
community
within the United States. That's very true. All right, and they are for the most part very successful in preventing the United States from siding with the British. All right, in this war, the United States attempts at this is really struggling because the populace wants to remain neutral, and quite frankly, one of the people who despise the British, people don't realize this, but Woodrow Wilson, who is the president of the United States at this time, is really someone who dislikes the British. He really dislikes the British Empire, and he really dislikes the British as a whole. So he would prefer not to get involved, especially if we're going to get involved. It just be because of either the French or the Germans. But he really does. He really has he is not an Anglophile. A lot of people don't realize this. Woodrow Wilson despised the British. From at least from the things that I've seen.
Real quick, I need your input on a family debate. They all like shrimp. I don't necessarily like shrimp. I say they're the midgets of the sea kingdom. What do you say?
I'm not a huge fan of shrimp, but if your family wants shrimp, you're eating shrimp tonight.
They're called fucking prawns, son.
I'm not. They can eat them. They can have all the little sea midgets they want.
All right. Okay. Well, I don't know about a proper answer, but here's something you can say in response to a conversation on that line. What do women and prawns have in common?
I'm not gonna answer this. I'm out of this.
Heads are full of shit, but the pink bits taste nice.
I was gonna say the smell, but that's a separate issue.
No, they are the midgets of the sea kingdom, but whatever.
So anyway, so that basically
how bad is the chat roasting me right now? I'm sure they all like shrimp.
I don't know. That's a good question. Let's take a look. Let's take a gander at the chat. Give me a second here. I'm sure I can find it. It shows up at some point today.
Falcon, cockroach of the sea. I agree, Falcon.
Cough, 1814 cough.
Well, technically they are. Well, they used to be regarded as that anyways. Crustaceans and technically related to them.
I'm sorry, I totally threw us off into fucking seafood. My bad. It was just a family debate. And everybody turned on me as soon as they heard I don't like shrimp.
But basically that does end, though, what's happened in February up to this point.
No, it does, but we were having a fairly good little conversation about the United States right now, because the United States is going to slowly be eased into this war. And towards the end of it, right before we join, it's almost like they just shove us out the window, right? Like, hey, they sunk this ship waving the American flag. Americans died on it. Oh, by the way, Mexico. Germany wants Mexico to invade the Southwest United States. Remember the Alamo and all that. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that is going to happen, but to be honest, it's not going to happen soon. That's still over 2 years away. We're still, you got to remember, this war lasts. We as Americans think of World War I as a 4-year war. It was hardly a 4-year war.
And also, too, you got to remember, I mentioned this over and over and over again. At this point in time, everybody thinks they're going to be home by Christmas.
Yeah, everyone thinks that, well, okay, it didn't happen this Christmas, but we can still end this fairly quickly. And there's still a long time away. There's still 3 more years of this war to take place. Mm-hmm. That's how devastating this war really is going to get. All right. At this point in time, Russia is suffering losses, but the real deprivation, the real starvation and everything that's going to happen hasn't happened yet. All these things are just in the early stages of this.
And as MC mentioned earlier on in this stream, that there's 200,000 casualties in a Russian incident. That's only just the beginning. Things are getting worse from here. And you see how many things just in this month alone? Yeah, that's nothing compared to what we're getting into. This is only just starting to build up. And if you think it's bad now, fucking, yeah.
The major offensives on the West, the major French offensives on the West, only one has taken place, and that resulted in 200,000 French casualties, 240,000, and they're going to be more. Mm-hmm. And you still got major battles that are going to take place from a troop standpoint, but from a decision standpoint, it just leaves people dead. There's no result. The result is you're right where you were. Nothing's really changed, except for the fact that so many more tens of thousands and literally hundreds of thousands of men have died.
Yeah, there's a poignant scene that shows basically the futility of this from a TV show called Blackadder. And it's where Rowan Atkinson and Stephen Fry playing this general and Rowan Atkinson playing Blackadder. They're in their office and there's a little diorama on the table that's only probably about fucking half a meter by half a meter, or 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot, something like that. And Stephen Fry's character goes, "Yes, this is how much ground we're taking yesterday." And the Blackadder says, "Oh, is that to scale?" Or something along those lines. And he goes, "Well, basically, no, that's it. That's the actual piece of ground that we've taken. What was sitting on their desk, they lost all these men just to take that 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot thing that was sitting on his table."
Yeah, no.
Unfortunately, and there's a lot of accuracy to that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of truth to that, more than people understand.
Well, no, and I think we'll end it here. Hopefully, we'll be back next Sunday. Hey, guys, there is some personal stuff going on in the real world, so I'll try and get back to the normal schedule. But if I miss a few shows, don't hold it against me, all right? And we'll see what happens in the next month or two. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We should be back live tomorrow. Good night, good luck, and definitely don't go to France in this time period. You definitely don't want to do that. Bye, everybody.
Baby.